Okay, let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive today into, well, Belgium, a
Right.
country that for a lot of people might just feel like, a quick stop on a trip around Europe.
Maybe Brussels for the EU or Bruges for the canals.
Exactly. But the sources we've looked at, a really detailed travel guide, and an analysis covering history, culture, practical stuff, they paint a picture of somewhere much more complex.
Oh, definitely. Much more fascinating and honestly pretty significant for its size.
Yeah, it punches above its weight.
It really does. And what
Yeah.
strikes me from these sources is just how much depth is packed in there. It gets overlooked sometimes, but it's a real powerhouse of history, culture, and let's be honest, amazing food.
Especially for one of Europe's smaller nations, yeah.
Totally.
So our mission here for this deep dive is to take you through what these sources reveal. We want to get past the surface level,
Right.
help you understand what really makes Belgium unique, how you can best experience its richness, and crucially, the practical side.
Yeah.
What does it cost? How do you actually get around?
And connecting that all up, Belgium sits right at this sort of geographical and cultural crossroads in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
The sources make it really clear that's not just a catchphrase. It's actually key to understanding the country. It shapes, well, pretty much everything: languages, history, architecture, the whole experience.
Okay, so let's dig into that. This crossroads idea, Germanic, Latin influences meeting.
Mm.
How does that history actually show up when you visit today? What do the sources say you'll see?
Well, it means you get layers upon layers of history. I mean, the sources cover everything from Roman times right through to it being, a major battleground in both world wars.
Wow.
So what you find on the ground are these incredibly well-preserved medieval towns like Bruges, grand cathedrals that just ooze history, and really significant historical sites, especially related to World War I in Flanders Fields.
And the architecture really embodies that history, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You mentioned Brussels Grand Place. The guide calls it one of Europe's most beautiful squares. Just pure Gothic Guildhall power on display.
It really is stunning.
Or just walking around Bruges, it feels like stepping into a medieval painting.
Oh, it absolutely does. And Ghent, too. The sources mention Ghent is often in Bruges' shadow, maybe, but it has this more vibrant, living history feel, partly because it's a big student town.
Ah, okay.
And the Belfry there in Ghent, another one of those iconic historical markers.
Okay, speaking of stepping into something,
Yeah.
let's talk food. Because the sources, they really dive deep here. They make it very clear. Belgium is probably not the place to go if you're counting calories.
Definitely not, no. The sources just emphasize the sheer abundance. We're talking waffles, and the guide is careful, distinguishing the Liège kind from the Brussels kind.
Right, different types.
World-famous chocolate, obviously. Frites stands literally everywhere. And the beer culture is just staggering. One source mentioned over 1,000 breweries. Another put it at over 1,500 types of beer.
Over 1,000 breweries.
Mm.
In a country that small, what does that tell us about the culture there?
Well, it points to a really deep historical connection, doesn't it? Brewing has been central to Belgian life for centuries. Started often with monasteries, then evolved into this incredibly sophisticated art form, amazing regional variety. And the sources note it's not just about downing a pint, it's about the specific glass for the specific beer, the tradition, the whole experience in a classic pub. Places like Delirium Cafe in Brussels are famous for their massive beer lists.
Right, it's a whole ritual.
I mean,
And the frites, the sources promise they'll change how you think about fries forever, yeah.
exactly. That double frying technique gives them that unique texture. Crispy outside, soft inside. And the sauces. The analysis source lists so many options beyond just ketchup or mayo. You've got Andalous, samurai tartare, loads of them. It's elevated street food, really, a core part of the diet.
Okay, beyond the snacks, though,
Yeah.
what about proper meals?
Oh, the sources highlight some really hearty traditional dishes. Moule frites is the classic mussels and fries.
Of course.
Carbonade flamand, that's a rich beef stew, but it's braised in beer, which gives it a unique flavor.
Beer again?
Naturally. And stomp, basically mashed potatoes mixed with different vegetables. It's comfort food, but done really, really well. Reflects the country's good farmland and, a love for simple quality stuff.
Right. So we've got the history, the amazing architecture, incredible food. Let's talk about specific places the sources really recommend experiencing. Brussels, the capital, obviously comes up first.
Yes, and it's definitely more than just the EU quarter.
Yeah.
The guide points to the quirkiness of mannequin pies.
The little statue.
Yeah, the peeing boy. Apparently he gets dressed up in different costumes, which is a fun local tradition the sources mention.
Huh.
Then there's the Atomium, which looks totally futuristic. Lots of excellent museums, art, history, you name it. And you actually can visit the EU Parliament building itself, often for free, the sources say.
Visiting the Parliament, that sounds like a pretty unique insight into European politics.
It really is. The sources mention you can do tours, sometimes even watch a session, depending on the schedule. It gives you a direct connection to Belgium's role as, a European hub.
But you definitely shouldn't just stay in Brussels, right?
Yeah.
Bruges seems universally recommended.
Bruges comes up constantly as almost, essential viewing for that postcard-perfect medieval center.
Yeah.
The canals, the buildings. It's incredibly well preserved.
Yeah.
But like you said, Ghent offers a slightly different energy. It's a university town, feels maybe a bit more down to earth, and apparently really comes alive during events like the big summer festival, the Gentsfeesten.
Okay, the sources also mention the Flanders Fields region near Ypres. That sounds like a very different, quite moving experience.
Absolutely. That area was right at the heart of the Western Front in World War I. The sources emphasize the memorials, the cemeteries, the museums there, like the In Flanders Fields Museum in Ypres. They really convey the human cost and the grim reality of trench warfare. It's a very poignant historical visit.
Yeah, sounds powerful. And then castles. The travel guide drops this amazing fact. Belgium apparently has more castles per square mile than anywhere else in the world. Over 3,000?
3,000. It's kind of mind-boggling, isn't it? And it speaks volumes about Belgium's fragmented past. Historically, it was all these different duchies and counties and principalities.
That makes sense.
The sources give examples ranging from proper medieval fortresses like the Castle of Bouillon to more grand estates like Gasbec near Brussels. Lots to potentially see if you're into castles.
And we can't forget Waterloo.
Right. Another huge historical site. The sources detail the main spots there. The Lions Knoll Memorial gives you that panoramic view of the battlefield. There's a visitor center explaining the battle's importance. Museums like the Wellington Museum, they even mention a pass you can get that covers the main sites pretty affordably.
So another layer of major world history, just easily accessible within Belgium.
Exactly.
Beyond the cities and the history, the sources also point towards the Ardennes forest for nature and outdoorsy stuff.
Yeah, the Ardennes offers a totally different vibe. Hiking, forests, rivers, even skiing in winter sometimes. It's also mentioned for its distinctive food, like wild game, and it's home to several of those famous Trappist breweries we talked about.
More beer.
Always more beer. And you can find coastal spots, too, like Ostend with its fish market, or just nice urban parks like the Parc du Cinquantenaire in Brussels.
It really sounds like there's incredible variety packed into a pretty small area.
Yeah.
The sources even mention things like the Antwerp Zoo or finding windmills dotted around near Bruges.
That's really the key takeaway from the sources. I think the sheer density of different experiences. You can go from a medieval city center to a WWI battlefield, then to a forest or a busy port like Antwerp, all relatively quickly.
Okay, so with all this variety packed in, let's get practical. First up, costs. What do the sources say you should budget?
They break it down pretty clearly. Hostel dorms are your cheapest bed, maybe 18 to 35 euros. Private rooms, whether in a hostel, a budget hotel, or maybe an Airbnb room, you're looking more at 70 to 150 euros. Full apartments, probably 150, 200 euros or more, unless you snag a really good Airbnb deal.
And campsites.
Campsites are the real budget option if you have the gear, yeah. Around 13 to 17 euros.
And for just daily spending, food, transport, maybe an attraction.
The sources suggest a backpacker, someone really watching pennies, could maybe get by on about 60 euros a day. That means staying in hostels, cooking some of your own meals, using the cheapest transport options.
Right.
A mid-range budget, say around 150 euros a day, lets you have a private room, eat out a bit more often, pay for some museums or attractions, use public transport easily.
And upscale.
Upscale starts around 270 euros according to the sources, but obviously the sky's the limit depending on how luxurious you want to go.
Makes sense. What about specific money-saving tips? What do the sources recommend?
Well, standard stuff like bringing a reusable water bottle tap water is perfectly safe to drink. They point out that beer is often the cheapest alcoholic drink you can buy in a bar.
Convenient.
Eating street food like those amazing frites, or maybe a kebab is very budget-friendly, like 5 to 7 euros for a filling snack or light meal.
Good tip.
Using budget buses like Flixbus for traveling between cities can be super cheap fares, starting from just €5 sometimes. Free walking tours are great for orientation, just remember you should tip the guide. And city tourist cards can be worth it if you plan on hitting lots of museums and using public transport a lot.
BlaBlaCar, the ride-sharing thing, that gets a mention too.
Yes, the sources suggest it's generally safe and can sometimes be quicker or cheaper than the train for certain routes. Plus, you might get to chat with a local.
Sure.
And if you happen to be a student, that ISA card can get you decent discounts on museums and attractions. Worth checking.
Okay. And getting around within the country. Sounds like the train network is the way to go.
Yeah, the sources are really positive about the trains. They seem to connect almost everywhere, making hopping between cities like Brussels, Bruges, Ghent, Antwerp really straightforward. Pretty quick. Brussels to Bruges is only about an hour, costs around €10 typically. Brussels to Antwerp is even shorter, maybe 45 minutes, and costs about €6. So, very manageable.
Are there any ways to save money on train travel if you're doing a few journeys?
Yes, the sources mention specific passes. There's a rail pass for people over 26 and a Go Pass 10 for those under 26. Both give you 10 journeys for a fixed price, which can work out cheaper than buying individual tickets if you plan it right.
Okay.
And apparently there are even unlimited travel passes for under 26s during school holidays. Worth looking into if that applies to you.
What about getting around within the cities?
Public transport is generally good. Metros, trams, buses are common. Day passes are usually available, costing around €7.5 in Brussels, for example.
Good to know.
But the sources strongly advise against using taxis unless absolutely necessary. They note they're quite expensive, high starting fares, high per kilometer rates.
Right. Walk or take the tram.
Exactly. Walking is great, especially in those compact, picturesque city centers like Bruges and Ghent. And cycling is big too, particularly in Flanders, where there are lots of dedicated bike paths. Could be a really nice way to explore some regions.
And renting a car.
Available, of course, but the sources suggest it's probably only necessary if you really want to explore very rural or remote areas. Given how good the train network is for getting between the main towns and cities, a car might be more hassle than it's worth for many trips.
Got it. When's the best time to actually go?
Well, peak season is July and August. That's when you get the warmest weather. Typically around 18 to 22 degrees Celsius, so 64 to 72 Fahrenheit. But it's also the most crowded and usually the most expensive time.
Makes sense. What about shoulder seasons?
For fewer crowds and still pretty pleasant temperatures, the sources recommend May, June in the spring or September, October in the autumn. Spring has blossoms, temps maybe 14, 18 Celsius, 57, 64 F. Autumn gives you nice fall colors, temps ranging maybe 5 to 19 Celsius, 41, 66 F, and potentially slightly lower prices.
And winter.
Yeah.
Worth considering.
November to March is definitely colder, averaging around 3 degrees Celsius, so about 38 Fahrenheit. Less likely to get heavy snow, but it can be damp. The big upside, though, is lower prices generally outside of the Christmas period.
Ah, the Christmas markets.
Exactly. They start in late November and are apparently quite magical. That can be a huge draw for a winter visit.
Okay, let's briefly touch on culture and language. This ties back to that whole Crossroads idea, doesn't it? Belgium is officially trilingual.
It is Dutch, French, and German. The sources clarify that Flanders, the northern part, is mainly Dutch-speaking, though it's often called Flemish, a dialect of Dutch. Wallonia in the south is primarily French-speaking. And then there's a small German-speaking community over in the east.
Sounds complicated.
It can seem that way, but the good news for visitors is that English is very widely spoken, especially in tourist areas, Brussels, and Flanders. The key thing the sources emphasize is just appreciating these distinct regional identities. They're really core to understanding Belgium's unique character.
And what about the people themselves? Any general pointers from the sources?
Generally described as polite, friendly, maybe a little reserved at first. Respecting privacy is important. A simple greeting goes a long way. And their love for food and drink is central. Meals aren't rushed. Beer culture isn't rushed. Their experiences to be savored.
That comes through strongly. The sources also bring up something maybe less expected: comic strip art.
Yes. Apparently, it's a really significant cultural thing there. Characters like Tintin, the Smurfs, they originated in Belgium.
No way, I didn't know that about the Smurfs.
Yep. The sources mention you'll see comic strip murals painted on buildings in cities, and there are dedicated museums like the Comic Strip Center in Brussels. It's highlighted as this unique art form that's really part of the national identity.
Interesting.
They also note Belgium's love for festivals, everything from huge summer music festivals to very local town celebrations.
Okay, one last crucial point. Safety. What's the verdict from the sources?
Generally, Belgium is considered a safe country for tourists. Violent crime against visitors is rare. The main thing the sources point out is the need for standard precautions against petty theft pickpocketing, basically, especially in crowded tourist spots, train stations, maybe on busy public transport, just like you'd be careful in any major European city.
Right, common sense stuff.
Exactly. Public transport itself is safe. Just stay aware when it's packed.
Yeah, and they mentioned the terrorism threat level.
Yes, they note it's generally moderate, similar to many Western European countries. Standard advice applies. Be aware of your surroundings in crowded public places, but don't let it dominate your trip or stop you from enjoying things.
Good perspective. Food and drink safe.
Oh yeah, food and drink are safe, though they do give a little nod to the strength of some Belgian beers, reminding you to drink responsibly. And the emergency number for police, fire, ambulance across Europe, including Belgium, is 112.
Useful to know.
Yeah.
So yeah, understanding these practical points, the cultural nuances, it really helps you connect with the country on a deeper level, doesn't it? It's not just about ticking off the main sites.
Absolutely. It helps you appreciate the context for everything you're seeing and experiencing.
Definitely. And this deep dive, hopefully, has aimed to provide some of that layered understanding. We've seen how Belgium, far from being just a quick stopover, is this fascinating country where history, culture, and truly incredible food and drink all converge.
And all in a surprisingly compact and pretty easy to navigate space.
Yeah. We've covered the must-sees, the must-eats based on these sources, talked about how to manage your budget, how to get around this quite diverse nation, and touched on that cultural tapestry that makes it, well, uniquely Belgian. So as you think about Belgium, maybe consider this final thought, circling back to that core idea from the sources. Belgium really does sit at this literal and figurative crossroads of Europe. How does that unique position, where all these diverse histories and cultures have met and mingled for centuries, how does that actually manifest in the everyday experience you might have there?
Yeah, how do you feel it?
Exactly. Think about the distinct regional languages you hear, the different identities, the layers of history just visible in the architecture of almost every town. And of course, that incredibly varied food and drink culture, which almost seems to embody this mixing of influences.
It's a great point. Appreciating Belgium's place at that crossroads really is key, isn't it? It helps you understand its depth, its richness. It's a country shaped by convergence, and you can definitely feel that and even taste it when you're there.